Have you ever been seized by a profound, pervasive sense of unease that seems to originate from no external cause? A psychological and emotional turmoil that gnaws at your deepest interior, even when the circumstances of your outer life suggest you should feel content and secure? It is a peculiar form of cold, aching emptiness that installs itself within the very core of your consciousness, a visceral feeling that without your conscious consent or knowledge, something absolutely essential has been extracted or damaged within the very structure of your spiritual being. There are countless moments when the hidden depths of your own soul issue silent distress signals, subtle, highly refined, energetic warnings that attempt to communicate a deep-seated spiritual emergency. These signals warn that certain patterns of choice, particularly those indulged in privately and repeatedly, possess the power to utterly breach the delicate, invisible field of protection that constantly envelops and sustains you. We are about to embark on a deep exploration of the spiritual perspectives offered by one of the most lucid and systematic codifiers of spiritual science, Allan Kardec, to meticulously unearth a subject that the majority of society is terrified to even whisper about. We will dissect the profound, long-term energetic consequences of compulsive, uncontrolled consumption of explicit content. What are the precise energies that this habit actively magnetizes? What precise spiritual frequencies does it forcefully activate? And why, according to numerous accounts transmitted from the higher planes of existence, can this deeply entrenched habit transform the individual into an entirely exposed, wide-open conduit, inviting invasion by deeply perturbed and spiritually starving consciousnesses that seek to satisfy their own lingering material addictions through the embodied person? This is not a discussion rooted in antiquated morality or religious dogma. It is an investigation into the immutable, raw laws of attraction and affinity that govern the entirety of the universe, laws which Allan Kardec brought into clear, systematic focus for the modern mind. We invite you now to the spiritual awakening, the place where the unseen dimensions gain voice, and the profound, often uncomfortable spiritual truths that contemporary society routinely attempts to suppress are finally brought into the illuminating light of day for mature contemplation. The foundational principle guiding this entire spiritual inquiry is the universal law of affinity, a cornerstone of Kardec's teaching, which explains that the spiritual realm operates not on chance or arbitrary punishment, but on a perfect, self-regulating system of attraction based on similarity. This law dictates that consciousness, whether it is currently embodied or disembodied, is perpetually drawn towards that which resonates with its own moral and vibrational state. In the expansive context of existence, the human being is not merely a complex arrangement of physical matter. We are, first and foremost, spirits encased temporarily in a material body, and every single choice we make, every thought we cultivate, and every emotion we allow to dominate our inner landscape contributes to the formation of a unique, highly specific vibrational signature for our spiritual being. This spiritual frequency is not static, it is dynamic, constantly oscillating and broadcasting its qualities into the energetic milieu of the cosmos. Spiritual wisdom is absolutely emphatic when it states that certain practices, particularly those that appear innocuous on the surface yet are repeated compulsively, generate a low, dense and chaotic vibrational pattern that systematically erodes the structural integrity of the soul's protective field. By lowering this personal frequency, the individual unwittingly aligns themselves with, and becomes easily accessible to, spirits who exist within the lowest, most turbulent spheres of the spiritual dimension. The spiritual plane is intensely organized by degrees of moral and intellectual elevation, meaning that just as people on earth gravitate toward those who share their interests, spirits, or the souls of the departed, are drawn to the living by the perfect congruence of their inner states. A soul saturated with the desire for light and self-improvement naturally gravitates toward and attracts benevolent, elevated influences, while a soul consumed by vice, uncontrolled passions, and earthly attachments acts as an unmistakable homing beacon for those disembodied consciousnesses still enslaved by the very same inferior instincts. Understanding this principle shifts the discussion entirely away from religious fear and firmly into the realm of energetic responsibility, highlighting that the spiritual experiences we encounter are predominantly a reflection of the internal frequency we consciously choose to maintain. When we delve into the spiritual mechanics of repetitive, compulsive consumption of explicit material, we must observe that the energetic consequence extends far beyond the surface-level psychological or emotional relief it might momentarily afford. This act is not simply a biological or cultural phenomenon, it is a powerful act of spiritual broadcast. The energy being activated and subsequently radiated outward is not the pure uplifting frequency of genuine love, profound emotional connection, or healthy, respectful desire, which Kardec taught are hallmarks of a developed spirit. Instead, the habitual focus on fragmented, often aggressive or detached sexual imagery and the subsequent emotional response directly activate and amplify the lower, more chaotic frequencies of compulsion, deep-seated emotional scarcity, urgent fragmentation, and a relentless, often dehumanizing form of primal desire. According to countless spiritual testimonies, this specific dense vibration operates as an unparalleled spiritual magnet, a true attractor for a category of disembodied consciousnesses specifically identified as obsessors, souls who have left the physical body but remain intensely, even agonizingly attached to the memory and sensation of earthly vices, particularly those related to the untamed, lower passions. These spirits linger in the inferior zones of the spiritual plane, eternally craving the bodily sensations they can no longer physically experience. They are drawn to the embodied person who radiates this low, corresponding frequency, seeking to vicariously relive or feed upon the generated energy. Thus, the act becomes a continuous energetic offering, an invitation to entities who see in the embodied person not a victim, but a perfect resonant instrument for their own lingering cravings. The individual's inner landscape, through this repetition, is gradually and systematically lowered to the exact vibrational level required for this insidious spiritual exchange to take place, cementing a silent contract of energetic participation. It is a common and dangerous misconception that spiritual obsession must commence with dramatic, overtly terrifying events, such as hearing malevolent voices or experiencing frightening, tangible physical phenomena. In the sober, systematized view of Allan Kardec, the process of spiritual obsession is almost always far more subtle, starting gently and growing steadily, its roots buried deep within the seemingly innocuous repetition of daily habits. The spiritual assault begins not with an external shock, but with an internal erosion of the soul's defenses. While the consequences of this habit are clearly felt by the physical body, in exhaustion, nervousness, and physical depletion, the true, silent, and most enduring destruction begins and propagates unchecked within the spiritual and energetic field. The obsessing entity, often not inherently evil, but profoundly lost, ignorant, and suffering due to its own moral and intellectual stagnation, does not require a dramatic entrance. It approaches gradually, manifesting initially as an insidious pattern of thought that simply refuses to be dismissed, an aggressive impulse that the person feels increasingly powerless to control, or a relentless, demanding sense of emotional urgency that completely dominates the individual's free will. This influence installs itself so slowly and expertly that the person gradually loses the ability to discern what is genuinely their own thought, emotion, or desire, and what is the induced suggestion being broadcast by the external, unseen force. The obsession becomes deeply entrenched before it is even recognized, turning the personal, isolated vice into a shared, consuming experience with an invisible consciousness that cunningly feeds upon the chaotic, low-frequency energy generated by the compulsive act. This is the true, insidious face of obsession, a quiet, persuasive erosion of self-mastery. To fully grasp the mechanism of spiritual obsession and attraction, we must turn to Kardec's detailed explanation of the perispirit, a concept that is absolutely central to the spiritist understanding of human interaction with the invisible world. The perispirit is described as a subtle, semi-material, fluidic envelope that inextricably links the purely spiritual core of the being to the physical, dense body. It is extracted from the universal cosmic fluid and acts as the bridge for all sensations, impulses and communications between the spiritual and material dimensions. When a spirit leaves the physical world, it retains its perispirit, which remains saturated with its moral state and its lingering earthly tendencies, including its vices and uncontrolled passions. For those disembodied spirits who were slaves to lust, gluttony, or any inferior, material passion, their perispirit remains heavy, dense, and fiercely attracted to the material frequencies of earth. Their torment in the spiritual plane is precisely the agony of being unable to physically satisfy the intense burning desires that still plague their fluidic body. They do not dwell in a hell of eternal fire, but in a self-generated state of prolonged suffering, dictated by their own low moral condition. The repeated consumption of compulsive, explicit content by an embodied person effectively creates a perfect resonance channel. The perispirit of the living person, by being habitually focused on and saturated with the dense, chaotic energy of uncontrolled desire, becomes a highly visible, radiant target for these suffering, vice-ridden spirits. They are not breaking and entering, they are responding to an explicit energetic invitation. This shared frequency allows the obsessing entity's perispirit to subtly interact and overlap with that of the embodied person, gaining a fluidic pathway to influence thoughts and emotions, thereby enabling the disembodied spirit to vicariously feel and indulge in the very sensations it can no longer generate on its own. The consequences of this continuous fluidic interference and the subsequent draining of vital energy manifest as a series of specific, escalating symptoms that are often tragically misinterpreted as purely mental illness or simple physical exhaustion. Allan Kardec, through his systematic inquiries, made it clear that while organic predisposition plays a role, spiritual influence must also be seriously considered. The physical effects are the outward signal of a profoundly intoxicated spiritual field. This spiritual toxicity can be recognized through a specific cluster of signs that intensify over time. First, a pervasive, often inexplicable exhaustion, a deep-seated weariness that no amount of rest can alleviate, signaling that the vital energy is being consumed by an external presence. Second, a noticeable drop in overall vital energy, a loss of life force that translates into chronic procrastination, a crippling lack of motivation, and a complete loss of interest in activities that once brought joy. Third, a sudden explosive irritability or uncharacteristic mood swings that appear without a logical trigger, the soul reacting to the constant, oppressive presence of a low-frequency consciousness. Fourth, the onset of frequent, often disturbing or guilt-inducing erotic dreams, which leave the individual with an overwhelming feeling of shame or moral contamination upon waking. Fifth, the constant unnerving feeling of being actively watched or followed, even in the secure solitude of one's own home, the physical senses reacting to the close, invisible proximity of the obsessing entity. Finally, an increasing mental confusion and a paralyzing inability to focus, as the individual's mind struggles constantly to differentiate its own thoughts and will from the intense, coercive suggestions of the obsessed spirit. These are not merely psychological quirks. They are the observable, measurable effects of a fluidic subjugation that is systematically undermining the will and health of the embodied person. A crucial point in the Kardecist understanding is that the relationship between the embodied person and the obsessor is not a simple, one-sided attack, but rather a complex, toxic form of spiritual symbiosis, a mutually destructive, codependent relationship established and sustained by the shared frequency of imperfection. The obsessing spirit, being emotionally and morally stuck, requires the embodied person to provide the necessary fluidic energy to experience its vice. It is an act of spiritual parasitism, where the weaker, disembodied spirit clings to the living to feel alive. Simultaneously, the embodied person, by repeatedly indulging the vice, reinforces the fluidic link and, in a tragic irony, finds their compulsion intensely magnified by the external influence. The obsessing spirit's influence acts as an amplifier, driving the person to repeat the habit with greater urgency and frequency, thereby securing the energy supply for itself. This mechanism explains why attempts to break the habit through sheer willpower often fail spectacularly. The individual is not merely fighting a personal urge, but is simultaneously battling an external force that is actively, intelligently, and persistently working to maintain the cycle of dependence. The obsessor is a slave to its own vice, and in its desperation, it seeks to enslave the living to satisfy its cravings. This knowledge is not meant to inspire fear, but rather to shift the focus from feeling like a helpless victim to recognizing the absolute necessity of altering the internal vibration, as the obsessor's power is entirely dependent upon the person's willingness, conscious or unconscious, to remain in vibrational harmony with them. The destructive consequences of this obsessive-compulsive cycle inevitably cascade outwards, deeply penetrating and corrupting all aspects of the embodied person's life, creating a spiritual ripple effect that touches everything of value. The obsession, rooted in selfish, fragmented desire, systematically destroys the ability to form and maintain authentic, loving relationships. The enslaved person often begins to withdraw and self-isolate from family and true friends, avoiding intimacy and deep connection because the deep shame and guilt associated with the hidden habit make genuine emotional vulnerability impossible. The spiritual shadow growing within them feeds on this isolation, pushing the person further away from sources of love and support, which are, ironically, the very energetic frequencies that could naturally repel the obsessing influence. Furthermore, the constant draining of vital energy and the feeling of being mentally manipulated lead to a pervasive sense of existential fatigue, a debilitating loss of purpose, and a complete disconnection from the soul's original life mission. The person begins to see their own body and their life not as a sacred temple or a beautiful opportunity for progress, but merely as a tool for the temporary, low-level satisfaction of an overpowering urge. This corrosive viewpoint is precisely what the obsessing entity encourages, as it justifies the self-destructive behavior and ensures the continued supply of dense energy. The self-esteem is systematically dismantled, the individual feeling perpetually guilty and unworthy, a feeling skillfully exploited by the obsessors to keep the person's vibration low and their will subdued. The most potent and immediate force in the entire process of liberation is the individual's inner decision, the sincere, conscious, and unshakable act of free will to break the cycle. Kardecism emphasizes that no spirit, however inferior or powerful in its influence, can overcome the persistent, true, and deliberate exercise of the embodied spirit's will. The simple, heartfelt decision to recognize the spiritual imbalance is, in itself, the spiritual spark that ignites the entire process of energetic healing. When the individual chooses to acknowledge that the habit is not merely a psychological weakness, but a portal for dense external energies, they immediately begin to withdraw the energetic consent that sustained the obsessive relationship. The obsessors only maintain their presence and power because the embodied person, through the repetition of the habit, unconsciously grants them access and remains in vibrational synchronicity. The moment the will is mobilized and focused on a sincere desire for change, a powerful reorganization of the personal energy field begins. This decision is an energetic broadcast of immense power, instantly attracting the benevolent attention and support of the person's own guardian angels and higher spiritual mentors, who are perpetually poised to assist once the embodied soul takes the definitive step toward its own liberation. It is the spiritual equivalent of flipping a switch, instantly increasing the light and changing the energetic current so that the shadows can no longer comfortably reside there. The path to complete spiritual restoration is not a sudden miracle, but a systematic, disciplined, and conscious act of self-reformation built upon three essential, interconnected pillars of being: elevated thought, purified emotion, and conscious action. The elevated thought forms the first line of defense. The human mind is a continuous emitter of fluidic waves. Every thought, positive or negative, is a real spiritual energy broadcast. Mental vigilance is therefore the primary tool against obsession. When an old toxic impulse or a compulsive image arises, the individual must practice immediate mental redirection, refusing to dwell on the negative suggestion. Instead of fighting the thought directly, which only amplifies it, one must calmly but firmly assert their true spiritual identity and replace the low thought with a higher concept, a genuine prayer, a positive affirmation of purpose, or an image of light and peace. This deliberate, conscious choice of frequency instantly weakens the obsessor's hold. as their influence relies on the person remaining in a receptive, lower mental state. The second pillar is purified emotion. The compulsive habit systematically destroys the soul's natural capacity for deep, sincere emotional connection by falsely associating intense pleasure with images devoid of true affection. Healing requires an emotional re-education, consciously choosing to value and cultivate feelings of kindness, genuine empathy, patience, and altruistic love. By connecting sincerely with others and appreciating the pure, subtle pleasures of life, the beauty of nature, the sincerity of a friend's touch, the soul slowly replaces the dense, fragmented pleasure of the vice with the expansive, light-filled joy of true feeling. The final pillar is conscious action. Liberation is incomplete without real, sustained efforts in the material world. This involves the sincere renunciation of the polluting source and the systematic replacement of the destructive habit with constructive, uplifting activities. The time that was once spent in isolation and self-degradation must now be dedicated to spiritual study, meditation, service to others, or any endeavor that aligns the individual with their highest purpose. This conscious, consistent redirection of energy effectively seals the spiritual door that the obsessors use to enter, structurally rebuilding the strength and integrity of the perispirit itself. To maintain and strengthen this reconstructed energetic field, the individual must continuously employ the tools of sincere prayer and persistent inner reform, which together form an unbreakable spiritual shield. Allan Kardec taught that prayer is far more than a simple act of supplication. It is a powerful, direct, and immediate communion of the spirit with the divine. Prayer offered with a whole heart, expressing genuine repentance and an unwavering desire to realign with the light, instantly mobilizes the spiritual benefactors. It is a powerful broadcast of pure intention that attracts high-frequency aid, with every sincere prayer acting as a restorative fluid that actively cleanses and fortifies the fluidic envelope of the perispirit. Furthermore, the discipline of inner silence is indispensable. In the quiet solitude of contemplation, the incessant noise of the world and the seductive suggestions of the obsessors begin to recede. By learning to observe one's own breath, body, and consciousness, the fragmented, scattered energy of the soul begins to return to its core, to its spiritual center, where true and enduring peace resides. However, Kardec was clear that no external aid, no matter how powerful, can substitute for the individual's persistent effort in self-reform. This means courageously confronting one's own lingering imperfections, pride, selfishness, and impatience, and making the deliberate choice, moment by moment, to act differently. The spiritual mentors and guides will never carry the person who still chooses to remain lying down. They only provide the hand to assist the one who has already begun the arduous but rewarding task of climbing. This sustained elevation of moral and vibrational standard makes the person literally inaccessible to the lower frequency entities, forcing the obsessors to retreat, not by violence, but by the immutable natural law of fluidic repulsion. In the profound and rational view codified by Allan Kardec, particularly in the Spirit's Book and the Medium's Book, obsession is emphatically not portrayed as a random curse or a sudden demonic invasion. It is instead defined as the persistent action that an inferior or unhappy spirit exerts on an individual, a phenomenon that is perfectly explained by the natural law of affinity. This perspective systematically removes the element of superstitious fear and squarely places the issue into the domain of spiritual responsibility. Kardec makes it clear that the obsessing spirit is, in the vast majority of cases, not an inherently evil entity, but a suffering, morally retarded soul, often a fellow human being from a previous existence who is still deeply attached to their earthly imperfections and vices. The obsession originates when the embodied person, through choices that indulge base instincts and lower passions, lowers their personal frequency, creating a perfect vibrational bridge for the suffering, vice-ridden, disembodied soul to connect. The obsession is thus a symbiotic relationship. The obsessor finds in the living person a physical means to indulge their lingering craving, be it lust, drunkenness, or malice, and the embodied person's own corresponding vice is terrifyingly amplified by the invisible, coercive influence. The power of the obsessor is entirely fluidic. It works through the perispirit, overwhelming the mediumistic or sensitive qualities of the living person making it difficult for the individual to distinguish between their own will and the external suggestion. This is not divine punishment, but the logical consequence of the law of cause and effect operating in the spiritual sphere, where low choices attract low companions, resulting in mutual suffering for both the living and the dead. The spiritual masters speaking through Kardec emphasized that the use of sexual energy, like any vital force, is governed by a precise spiritual economy. The problem with compulsive consumption is not the energy itself, but the manner of its activation and dissipation. When desire is detached from respect, genuine affection, and the elevating purpose of procreation or true intimate union, the higher purposes recognized by Spiritism, it immediately descends into the realm of mere sensual pleasure, fragmentation, and base instinct. This specific pattern of energy use creates a deficit in the spiritual economy, converting what should be a creative, unifying force into a chaotic, dense emission that signals a deep-seated spiritual illness. Spirits who died attached to these pleasures find their suffering compounded by the incapacity to satisfy their passion without a body. Their agony is a powerful magnet for the living who are currently generating the exact same energy flow. The obsessors do not literally consume the physical body, but they consume the fluidic energy produced by the passion and the repeated act. This consumption is what leads to the profound, inexplicable physical and mental exhaustion felt by the obsessed, as their vital fluids are constantly drained to feed the clinging spiritual parasite. This spiritual understanding forces a re-evaluation of the habit. It is not just a personal habit, it is a major transaction of spiritual energy with profound, measurable consequences on the vitality and moral elevation of the soul. The journey we have charted culminates in the most powerful truth revealed by spiritual philosophy. The individual possesses the ultimate, sovereign power to reclaim their spiritual integrity and put an absolute end to the state of fragmentation. No matter what mistakes were made, no matter how long the vice has been active, and no matter how formidable the spiritual influence appears, the moment the spirit in the physical body decides to return to its essence of light and purity, the foundation of the obsession crumbles. This purity, as understood in this context, is not a puritanical moralism, but a vibrational purity, a state of being where the inner frequency is so elevated, so consistently maintained on the plane of positive thought, love, and constructive action that the lower frequency entities simply cannot physically endure the proximity. The obsessing spirits are forced to retreat, not by being cast out, but because the law of affinity that drew them in now repels them just as strongly. The choice is always before you: to continue living in a state of fragmentation, feeding invisible entities and sacrificing your personal peace for a fleeting, hollow pleasure, or to choose complete, integrated healing, cultivating the inner presence that guides you toward your highest potential. When this choice for light is made, the spiritual doors that held you prisoner are definitively closed and sealed, and the peace that floods the soul is a true, authentic, and lasting peace that emanates entirely from your own conscious return to your divine origin.